discussing all about the possibility of buying a house on the water, but not necessarily the most conventional types. We're really talking about these floating homes and, more importantly, houseboats, boats that you can live on. During the break, we were talking a little bit about the difference between just the process of buying one of these. You're not buying a house in a lot of cases with these houseboats. You're buying a boat, as we talked about, and it's a boat that can move and is tied up to a dock, and for lack of a better term. What is the buying process for buying one of these versus another home?
The biggest difference in buying a houseboat is in the financing. It's a very specialized lending situation, and right now there's one primary lender for houseboats out there, which is Sound Community Bank. The requirements for buying a boat are always different than buying for a house, and so consequently the lenders look at it differently. It's also different when it comes to insurance. Insurance tends to be higher for a boat because, they sink.
Sure.
And so...
hopefully not, but yes, they do.
Right, but they need to cover that feasibility. There's also another type of property out there which we didn't mention, which is house barges. And those are a hybrid between the floating homes and the houseboats. And Seattle actually created the definition for the house barge in 1990, and they are essentially vessels that do not have engines and nav stations and are designed to be navigated by towing. Seattle no longer allows any more of those house barges, and there are approximately 34 of those on the lake.
And what is a house barge?
It's basically a houseboat without engines and without steering.
So not like a barge where they've just built like a single-family residence.
Virtually identical to these, with the exception of Kevin's description.
They just take out the engine.
They typically never had
or never
engine.
had one. Got it.
Right.
I'm thinking house barge. I could only imagine you get one of these big barges. Big barges, like across 520, they're building bridge barges. You just throw up like a 6,000 square foot house and anchor it in the middle of the lake.
Well, they have a barge-style hull, which is not uncommon. I mean, there are a lot of vessels out there with barge-style hulls. In fact,
what is a barge-style hull?
The houseboat that we live on is a barge-style hull, which is basically a box, usually with a raked front, so it has a little bit of slope to allow it to cut through the water. And they're typically built on these barges because they're very stable. They don't tip easily. And that's one of the reasons why, some houseboats are preferred more than others, is because they don't rock as much. That's one of the things you need to consider when you're buying a houseboat. They actually move. They
rock.
Yes,
so
they rock.
The seasick people who get seasick, be wary, huh?
Yeah, you kind of want to test your legs, your sea legs when you're getting a houseboat. A good idea is, if you can, go out and stay with somebody or rent one. Experience what it's like. If you get seasick, that may not be the right choice for you.
You just sit there with one of those bracelets on all the time.
Wait for a storm to go preview.
Yeah, there you go. So when somebody looks at, we talked a little bit about the financing. There's only a few banks, or one or two banks that'll even do these. What is the process pretty similar? I mean, we of course in the mortgage business right now, people have a tough time getting loans. There's a lot of paperwork. It can be very cumbersome. I would imagine it's similar.
It is similar. Sometimes the paperwork is actually less, though, because you are buying a vessel. You're not buying a house. The loan programs that are out there are very similar to the loan programs for homes. They tend to require more down. You're not going to get an FHA loan for a houseboat. You're not going to get a 3.5% down loan. They typically require at least 25% down. And they're looking more at the person and their credit capacity than they are at the asset. So they're more concerned about the borrower than they are about the collateral.
Okay. And typically on them, not typically. For house barges, you close through a specialized closer. And we use Phil Miller law to close a house barge. And then on our vessels, our houseboat vessels are closed through a marine title company, not through your typical escrow you would close a floating home through.
It's pretty different. So even going back to that point about finding a real estate agent who understands how to do this, there's a big difference. I mean, we're not talking about a few subtle differences.
Huge.
I mean, your closing differences, your inspection is totally different. You better know the ropes before you just go jump into the ring.
Your hull types are different. We have a steel hull. They're aluminum hulls. They're wood fiberglass overlay hulls. So they're extremely different. So you have to know what types of surveys or inspectors you need to get, or whether it's a dive.
Now, you guys don't only sell these. You actually live on one.
Correct.
And you live on I mean, tell me a little bit about, if you don't mind, tell me a little bit about how you guys have enjoyed it or what you like about it. Tell us about how you guys have come to like it and whatnot.
So our houseboat is a little bit unusual. You're talking to Kevin and Linda. We own the Kev Lynn, which is a 72-foot paddle wheeler. It looks very much like
it's bigger than 1,500 square feet.
Right. It looks like a Mississippi riverboat. Actually, it's only about 1,260 square feet.
Interior space.
But we do have about 600 square feet of deck space, which we use a lot. We had no intention of ever buying a houseboat. It was quite by accident. We walked in, looked at each other, fell in love, and 3 weeks later we owned it. We initially bought it as a weekender. We were going to go down and spend the weekends there, but we kept making excuses. When Monday would roll around, hey, we've got a washer dryer. We don't really need to go back home. What are we going back home for? Well, we got to feed the bird. Well, we can bring the bird down here. It wasn't long. 6 months later, we sold our big 3,600 square foot house and moved permanently.
It's kind of funny. You guys live on a boat and have a bird. Just kind of gives you that pirate.
It's a parrot.
Is it a parrot? I love it.
Yeah.
It's a parrot.
You got a pirate hat too?
Yeah.
Amigo.
I forgot my eye patch today.
That's okay. Linda and Kevin Bagley join us discussing different ways to live on the house. We just have a couple more minutes. So you guys moved in to this boat, decided that you wanted to live there more than you wanted to go home. And I've heard there's pretty tight community around people who live in the water.
Absolutely. That was one of the largest surprises for me, was the community aspect. It's an extremely friendly environment. I mean, when you live in a house, you know your neighbors and you wave and you say hi and so forth. But when you're living in a marina environment, people come on board your vessel all the time. You get stopped walking down the dock. It's very, very tight community. People are looking out for each other. They help you moor your boats. They help, in storms. They look out for each other. So it's definitely an environment that is extremely friendly, and it was a real pleasant surprise for me.
Because you're kind of living on top of people, right? I mean, your neighbor is across the dock.
Very close.
You don't have setbacks. It's so you better like the people you're living next to in some ways.
And for some reason, you put people on the water, they all get very friendly.
Of course, everybody waves. You ever notice on a boat, everybody just waves as they go by?
You don't do that on the freeway.
No, you wave, but with one finger. Totally different. You don't hear a lot of people having boat rage.
Yeah.